Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights. Here are your hosts, Hector, Kolonas, and Mike LaRosa.
Welcome to another This Week in Coworking recap episode. I'm once again joined by Mike. Mike, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's been a really busy week in the news of co-working, a little bit of which I think you had some involvement in. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. And I'm most definitely looking forward to seeing Taylor Swift tomorrow night. So it's been a fun week. How about yourself?
I'm definitely envious of your concert going experiences tomorrow. I think I will be going to bed after this week tomorrow. Just go straight to bed, 8 p.m. That's going to be my Friday night, but it's all been worth it. It's
Well, much deserved though. So let's talk about, it's not so much an elephant in the room, but most definitely the most clicked on topic. Why don't you take it away since you did the interview yourself?
the link that was in the newsletter was the press release that they put out, which, as you can assume, or as you could have predicted from three companies of this size with many PR teams and legal firms involved, the press release was very informative on a high level, but it just made us and probably everyone else who read that have more questions than answers. And so I was really lucky and excited about the fact that we managed to bring in all three CEOs from those companies onto the podcast for an exclusive sit down and dig right into what does it mean, who's involved, who can use it, how does it work, what does the tech stack look like, when is it going to roll out to more spaces, what is the big vision, and everything else. So I'm not going to kind of regurgitate that 45-minute sit down, but if you did miss it, hop over to thisweekincoworking.com/listen, see that episode, or just click in the previous episode before this where you're listening to this.
It was an awesome conversation. I really appreciated the insight that all three offered. And like you said, I don't want to beat a dead horse and steal the other episode's thunder, but it is really exciting to see that there is this general collaboration over competition environment that they're trying to foster, which is really kind of like an awesome full circle moment, right? Because when WeWork first hit the scene, it was kind of growth at all costs and very cutthroat and very competitive while trying to advocate for community, right, within their membership. And it's just really cool to see that I think everyone has finally clued in that there's so much opportunity for everyone that like let's work together smarter, not harder. So touche, I know coordinating that was quite a feat on top of your normal newsletter tasks and full-time jobs. So everyone tune into that. It's a great combo.
Appreciate it. I think you did bring up a pretty good point. I mean, the numbers that some of the speakers dropped were just fascinating. The number of flex space we're going to need, the number of demand that's shifting away from kind of corporate HQs, as well as, just looking at kind of the bigger visions of some of the CEOs. And going back to what you said, it is absolutely a more collaborative environment. I went in there thinking, this is going to be a closed garden, Apple light, we play with our friends, everyone else play outside. But that's absolutely not where this is going. Now, obviously, I'm excited because I got to sit down with the gentleman and dig into it. But this has been tried before. There are other players, there's other operators building alliances. There's other operators who've tried, a co-working pass.
So there's been a lot over the years. There was CoPass, which started out as like a network program, and then they were selling memberships. There's different types of aggregators. In the past 2 years, we've seen like DeskPass, Industrious partnership. Then WeWork even had their own Upflex partnership, right? Which is very interesting to see how WeWork has become so big and has so many different products now that this partnership is different than the other one that they have with Upflex, right? So I think it will be helpful for the operators out there to hear what these three events had to say, because it's going to help them best prepare their own businesses to participate, which is really great.
And they all did hint that they are looking to collaborate with other operators. I'm very excited to see, are others going to get involved? Are they not? If not, why not? If you do have your own thoughts on this, definitely leave a comment on that podcast episode, leave a comment on this podcast episode. We really want to kind of hear from you and to hear what you think about this big news this week. I think, that's as much we can dive into. Let's jump into something else that was in the newsletter this week. Mike, what else caught your attention this week?
Yeah, so it was a culmination of a couple different stories. And I know I've said this before, but really the value that I get having been a subscriber to This Week in Coworking is not just the weekly bits, but it's the ability to compile weeks upon weeks. 'Cause there's news every week, every day, every hour, right? Like we even joke, we do our best. A newsletter comes out Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, there's probably already a new story. So you can kind of get lost in that, but like these trends are what people are really trying to understand. And so what we've seen in a few of these stories this week is that there is most definitely an awakening of landlords that are embracing flex where back in the day they didn't want anything to do with it. And without like getting too, historical and getting on my soapbox, there was a time where I had pitched an entity with this concept of having a managed flexible space, but those banks and those owners wanted a triple credit rated, triple net lease customer, right? Because that's all that they understood. I think what we've seen now, and this has been something that all of us in the industry have had to be very patient for, because I think we all underestimated how many layers there are. The banks and the financiers that are funding the owners of these buildings are finally starting to recalculate the value they put on a building and how they come up with that, and also the valuation of a flex space. And so I think you can see throughout the last couple of weeks of the newsletter, and in particular, like there's 3 or 4 stories this week that are all about, one space is losing their space to a landlord that's taking it over. And guess what they're doing with it? They're literally turning right around and they're making it flex. We also had some really, really big news from JLL in Asia, where they're rolling out a brand new product that is basically designed for landlords to deploy. What's the new term that you now are calling it? Because you have a habit of nicknaming terms. So I want to give you fair credit. What was it that you came up with?
I call it run for you flex. So kind of like done for you, but run for you. Like it's not only
Yeah.
kind of planning, setting it up, but also maintaining it and managing it on behalf of the landlord. And essentially the landlord just pulls in that profit, right?
Basically productizing a tech stack and a set of SOPs, no different than all these management companies do for hotels, right? So that was really exciting to see that JLL Asia is doing that, but it's exciting but not surprising, right? Because we know that Asia is, I would say, second behind London for serviced office ecosystem and culture, right? And it's normal for all these multinationals to have outposts there. So really a couple of those big stories were the JLL and then also the space in Washington that the US Navy is actually taking over the entire building, right? So like the US Navy said, okay, we like this flexible work, we need it in the rest of the building. So I would say I think that the opportunity here is massive for operators that have proven success in a region or a multi-region kind of level for them to finally engage with building owners and maybe get more preferential or more conducive financial terms, or even are now able to consider the management model. This is not news. It's not breaking here on the second weekly recap of the TWIC podcast, but I think it's just reinforcing that this is where the shift is. So if you are thinking about opening a space or you're thinking about expanding, you don't necessarily have to get uh, locked into that lease financial model.
There is that shift away from that traditional rent arbitrage and more to kind of management agreements and creative contracts. Just really, really
Yeah.
worth the PSA here. If you are going down that kind of management route, more flexible terms with the landlord, and they're seeing everything you're doing, they're seeing that success, they're tasting that profit. How are you protecting your IP? How are you protecting your SOPs? How are you protecting your processes so that you are as valuable to the landlord as the space that they've now fitted out, right? So definitely just keep that back in mind as you're seeing the shift, as you're seeing more and more landlords. I think we even had another story from British Land this week, kind of showing off all their flex products. We had Heinz a couple of weeks ago on the podcast with Annie Draper sharing their shift and how they're kind of expanding their flex products across multiple different items. So definitely just kind of proceed with caution, but kind of be a bit more protective about what you do great. And what's that saying? If you do something really, really well. Don't do it for free. I think it's from the Joker. So definitely kind of keep that in mind, especially for your amazing operators who have really struck gold with how you turn a space into a place. Just think about what your next steps are as you kind of explore expansions or renewals with your landlord.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up the British Land article because, they had an initial concept called Story that was started in like 2018, 2019, right? So this was a pre-COVID concept. And since then, they've now, as you mentioned, they've got three other new concepts. So it's not much different. And this is kind of another teaser, shameless plug to what Jason was saying on that podcast interview of like having a Marriott style umbrella, right? So you've got the British Land portfolio now, and if you need biotech space, they've got a brand for you. And if you need traditional co-working, they got a concept for you. And if you need just want traditional, it's actually interesting. They have traditional office space as like its own category now, right? Where that used to be the entire category. So that's pretty interesting. And to tee us up to the next article, because these do have a lot in common, we're seeing a lot of these operator type agreements happening in the suburbs. And so Michael Kloppenberg from the Avis and Young Flex team shared a really cool LinkedIn post of a Yardi white paper that he participated in talking about what is this surge in the suburbs. And I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of the loyal followers and subscribers to This Week in Co-working will not be surprised because I think a lot of them are in the burbs, right? But having sat on the aggregator occupier side of this industry, back to the office is happening in a lot of places except for North America. And a lot of that has to do with the time of the commute, the costs of the commute. And we're seeing this real kind of burgeoning trend of all these suburban spaces opening up, right? And they're taking over these older, maybe like lower tier B or C suburban office parks. They're getting rejuvenated. And, there's people that have been in the industry longer than I have that have always said that the suburban play fit better for the type of co-working customer. It would boost foot traffic in certain centers. So we're seeing a lot of overlap with retail, like co-working retail kind of suburbs. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this suburban surge.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the actual article. There was a lot of data sets in there within the white paper showing kind of what the percentages of, the thousands of businesses they interviewed, how many of them were looking to like shrink their corporate outlay and spread that out to kind of more suburban spaces. And there was like many spaces, many companies were looking at over 50% reduction in their corporate HQ size. That doesn't mean they're letting go necessarily of all that stock, but they're just moving them to these kind of suburban locations. But it also touches on a whole bunch of topics we've seen in previous newsletters, as you said, but also in the podcast. All three CEOs on the WeWork Yardi Blast podcast mentioned how there's this overlap between the city center locations and the need for suburban hubs. We saw Jesse in Australia from Watso having their locations and then spreading out and actually renting locations from other landlords because they had demand in the suburbs, taking over small space and expanding there. I mean, it's $30+ million in additional revenue for a property owner through their flex offering, and this most coming from suburban. And then, it's like a trend that we just keep seeing more and more demand. The number that links into that article is that they soar through the Yardi commercial listing service, which is Yardi's backbone for finding office space, a 240% demand for co-working spaces in the suburbs. Now, that's an astronomical number for a company that's traditionally been focused on filling office space. So it's just absolutely something we should definitely keep an eye out. If you're expanding, look towards the suburbs, right? Look towards those hubs where people don't want to commute into. But also just keep in mind, like if it was me, I would look for what is the most congested traffic routes around the big cities.
Yeah.
And position just outside of that. We see here Industrious, Silverman, etc., all popping up locations just before the tunnel into New York, because getting to Jersey City is not a hard thing. Getting into New York and out of New York is the hard thing. So it's just really, really
and expensive.
yes, and
expensive.
And tolls. Yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, a lot of the time when operators explore where they should open locations, they look at GDP, they look at earning brackets, they look at that stuff, but look at traffic, right? As you said, in America,
Yeah.
almost everyone drives, especially out in the suburbs. And if you can find those congestion bottlenecks, those are good locations to kind of explore spaces.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh, before you jump into market moves, I want to just run through tech quickly. Being a very big tech geek, I want to just kind of just touch on some of the tech news this week. Um, we saw an integration between Office R&D and technology within. We saw an integration between Gable and Nexus. I know we discuss this all the time, Mike. There are so many integrations being pulled into the market right now. We have to often debate which ones are newsworthy, which ones aren't, which ones are nice to have, which ones are critical, which ones add actually new capabilities. But if you take into just account that this week alone, we had the WeWork Yardi integration news, we got this news, and we had the Gable Office R&D tomorrow, which was then, and Gable and Nexus in 1 week, you see that more and more platforms are really investing heavily in making an integration part or integrations part of their offering. But on the flip side, I know that there's some operators who have public facing QR codes. I've seen it, we've shared it a bunch of times on billboards, people able to like scan a QR code and book a day pass at a space directly through their website. Or as you're in the lobby, you can kind of book a meeting room and pay directly. There was a video I found online. It was going pretty much like spreading like wildfire through the cybersecurity sections of the internet. And it's a video of someone realizing that on the parking QR codes, someone had put up a fake QR sticker perfectly over the QR code that took them to a lookalike website that just rerouted the money to scammers.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's something that every co-working space should be thinking about, but if you have got, as you kind of expand out and maybe you add more locations, you add fully automated locations, which is a trend we looked at last week, definitely just consider this human security element, especially where it involves your money and your reputation and your customer experience. Just keep that in mind. Just wanted to throw it out there as a PSA.
It blows my mind how much energy and creativity people pour into this type of criminal behavior, because this is no different than like the skimmers, right? Where they put like the overlay on the credit card reader at the gas stations, or, I think that unfortunately a lot of people that get into co-working do so because they want to foster a great community and they're really passionate about what they're doing. But you often times, to your point, have to think about the worst nature in people and you have to adequately prepare, right, for Wi-Fi network security, as well as even something like, I've read articles about those USB drives, like, and things on those that then get on your device when you plug it in. So yeah, I'm glad you included that, because to tell you the truth, it didn't even dawn on me. Right. Like, I'm aware of the USB thing, I'm aware of the skimmer thing, but just like another thing that, how many times do we actually use QR codes almost daily now for different things? And it's like, wow, I would have totally got. So I appreciate you for including that.
So you're probably wondering, I mean, I know that you know more about me, Mike, but folks are listening like, okay, Hector, you write a co-working newsletter. Why the hell are you following cybersecurity news? Well, my actual day job, obviously at Syncaroo, is we get hired by a lot of operators to be their chief information officer on a fractional basis, which means it's our job to recommend and keep an eye on the things that they should be worried about without stressing them out, right? Imagine just throwing that. You should allow people to put USBs into your computers. You should check your parking lot for dropped USBs that could hack your networks. You should make sure you're upselling Wi-Fi and secure VLAN. There's so many security things that people have to stress about. But luckily, as you can see from the gray hairs,
Yeah.
we take on that stress.
Yeah, or even just like basic Wi-Fi. Like, how many times have I been to a co-working space where that password is the same it was 2 years ago when I was there the last time, right? Like, that's just asking for it. So I think it's been so exciting to see you grow what Syncaroo does and how it services these different customers of yours, because these integrations are exciting and it's awesome to see the industry evolve. And obviously, a lot of the drive behind it is the real-time inventory that's being asked for from these aggregators, which is being asked for from the customers. But it is really overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? When you're kind of like in integration soup and you've got different acronyms, and a lot of people get into co-working because they're good at doing co-working, they didn't get into it because they've got expertise in tech or IT. Some people do, right? That's kind of their journey. But for those of you out there that find yourself lost, like there are resources out there.
And yet there's a whole bunch of other questions around aggregate integrations. Do you give them all your data? How much data can they see? Can they see your customer data? Do you trust the platform to do the right thing? Do you trust their security? So that there's a million more questions around tech, but this is not a tech episode. I just wanted to give a rundown. If anyone does have questions or things like that, you know where to find me. I'm pretty accessible online. I'm always happy to geek out about the questions you probably should be asking or the things you don't know that you don't know. Mike, over to you for some.
So we're going to just do kind of like quick drive-bys through market moves every week. For more information, feel free to click into the newsletter. So we did mention that there was an interesting story of an operator handing over a building to the US Navy. That was a cool read. But also Sydney, Australia is getting a private members club. This is not really outside of the trend. Once again, we're talking about trends. Like we see a lot of these different types of membership clubs open up. This one's going to be very, very interesting. You should double click in to read more about some of the member amenities they're offering and what the price point is. That was a shock. We see that there is a church being transformed into a co-working space in Kansas City. Kansas City has a near and dear place in my heart. I'm not surprised to hear this. This is not a new thing, but it is exciting always to see when another one happens. For any of you that are familiar with the Mall Inn, based in New York City, they've recently expanded to Nashville. They just hit another new hot, trendy city that you'll need to check into the newsletter to find out where it is. There's a little shameless plug. But the Mall Inn is most definitely one of the most popular spaces in New York, known to be very high end. I think it's actually kind of nicer than Soho House in some ways. And then we're also seeing another new flex warehouse office combo brand hitting the market in Arizona. So last but not least, we also have the official opening of Tower 49 in New York City by Industrious. This has been a long time coming, and I believe it's like their flagship location. 16 floors. It's going to be a massive location for them with co-working private offices and meeting rooms. So for market moves and more, check out our newsletter.
We brought two fantastic guests to join us on this week's recap show. With us, we have Olivia Chatten and Sam Pickering. Without diving into too much, who are you both and what do you do?
I'm Sam Pickering. I'm an exec director at the Instant Group, and I look after sustainability and wellbeing across Instant Group and also the advisory business of Incendium. I've been doing sustainability for a long time. So yeah, it's great to meet you. Thanks for having us on.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I am a senior consultant here at Incendium and the Instant Group. My background is in commercial real estate, working for a university. So I've been in the kind of flex sector for about 8 years now.
Thank you both for joining us. You're both here because in our impact section of the newsletter this week, we talked a little bit more about the work you've done and are doing with the International Well Building Institute, the IWBI. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what it is that the Instant Group and the Well Building Institute are doing?
Thanks, Hector, for this opportunity. I think I'm going to go back just really slightly because I've been doing sustainability, as I say, for a long time. I used to be at CBRE, and then we set up Incendium, which was an advisory business that advised really corporate real estate functions in big enterprises, Fortune 100 and FTSE 100 type businesses, where they should be, what their supply chains should look like, and from my side, how they take a corporate ambition and turn it into the reality of their office portfolio. Now, we got acquired by the Instant Group about 5.5 years ago. So I've now very quickly got into the world of co-working and flex. And so one of the challenges, but mainly benefits I saw was the Instant Group has got a massive operator base where I could really make an impact at huge scale. So this co-working rating is the next step of what we're trying to do as an organization. We started with the sustainability index, which is simply answering a question, which is when I build a carbon footprint, and my team does, for major corporates, one bit that was missing was sustainability data. So I wanted to set something up that was scalable and good value in terms of dollars spent, and simple enough that people could provide data. We could validate that against the greenhouse gas protocol and then send them back a report that said, this is how you report back per desk, per square foot, whatever. So that has got great scale and great momentum. The other thing that I immediately was thinking about was well-being, because clearly productivity and the well-being of people within co-working and flex space is hugely important, both for operators, but also people wanting to work in there. But and having worked with the IWBI for a long time, their focus has always been, and obviously it's progressed over time, and I've worked with them nearly 15 years now, was really focused on landlords and big developers, refurbishments and so on and so forth. Now they've developed various rating systems that allows big corporates to start to look at policies across an organization to get rated. But the flex co-working space was always missing. Now the sustainability side I could do. It was easy. It's a global approach. It's a greenhouse protocol. I've done it for a long time and it's aligned to global best practice. But when it comes to well-being, I'm no doctor and I'm no researcher. So I needed to find a kind of a world-leading partner that drove best practice and had all the research that proved anything you do actually led to productivity and healthy outcomes. And so it didn't take me long to start to collaborate with the IWBI around the co-working sector, the influence we had on that, and start to say, look, operators work invariably not in a whole building. They work in a proportion of a floor or a whole floor or a number of floors, but invariably they can't actually impact a number of things that are really owned by the landlord. And so we started to work through what a partnership could look like. And it was very new for us. Obviously, I know the WELL certification well, but for the IWBI, it was quite a new partnership because they hadn't really done this in this way before, where we ultimately partner with them and we are responsible then for the co-working rating going forward, but it's all backed up by their product. And so that was really the backstory to where we got to. So we signed the initial MOU at the beginning of this year. And since then, my product team and the IWBI's product team have worked very closely together with a number, about 15 operators globally, to really shape what this product looked like, what this rating looks like. And so back in June, we gave a taste to the sector and the world, as it were, around what we were starting to do behind the scenes. And then obviously we got to the launch on Tuesday, the 15th of October, where we launched this to the whole world at the London Summit, which was great.
Amazing. That's great news. Congrats on the launch. And it's definitely been a labor of love, I would say. It's obviously a topic that's really important to you. It's also important to all of us, everyone who uses a space and everyone who uses these buildings. So it's a fantastic project. And I'm really happy that we got to bring you on and discuss it a little bit. You did say there was 15 operators in the initial test. Are we going to start seeing some of their certifications soon? Have they already been announced? What does it look like from those first 15?
Yeah, so a lot of those 15 have already signed up. We had to move really quickly before the launch, but so far we've got Clockwise, Cobra, Landmark, and Olivia, you'll have to remind me of the last one. I've forgotten what it is.
Iconic offices over in Dublin.
Yeah, exactly. So they have all signed up. And so those ratings are going through now. We're gathering the evidence and then they'll be rated certainly, I would imagine, within the next month, but certainly by the end of the year. The other thing I'd add, by the way, Hector, on this, and the whole purpose of this, is we often find when you do WELL certifications, there's a huge amount of consulting costs related to actually getting these certifications. And we wanted to develop a product that was scalable and almost self-serve. So you didn't have to spend huge amounts of CapEx. You didn't have to get armies of people to help you to do this, because a lot of operators, and this is what, as we developed it with those 15, we started to see a lot of people were doing huge amounts of amazing things around well-being, but they never had the boundaries and they certainly never had the evidence that said, right, if I do that, I can definitely with confidence play back to the occupiers of that space, be big corporates, or to individual occupiers, the benefits that they prove. So this is a very good value and achievable way of getting a rating, which was a really fundamental part of it. And the other thing that I really wanted to do, going back to that sort of enterprise side and the bigger businesses, we're finding that more and more of those businesses are looking at their portfolios in a flexible way. That proportion is relatively small and it's getting bigger and bigger. So then you have this side where they've got WELL certifications, they've got sustainability certifications in their headquarters. And then you're asking employees to work in a different way. And it now allows them to actually say, we're going to ask you to work in a different way in an amazing space, because this sector far better than I do. But actually, it very much aligns through various initiatives like the Well Co-working rating to what we do in our headquarters. And I think that change in working behaviors just gives that surety for corporates, which again is one of the additional benefits and something we've worked really hard to achieve.
I know that there's a lot that goes into getting a well rating. I'm good friends with Amy King, who had a well rated building that was home to a co-working space in Dallas. I know that there's a lot that goes into that, right? Certain types of products and components, and do they or do they not have off-putting gas, like water filtration, air quality, whatnot. What are some of the differences between the standard building well rating and the factors that you've curated or customized for co-working operators? I'm just curious to see what the differences are between those.
Yeah, as you rightly say, the well standard V2, as they're now calling it, has existed for decades, and they continue to build on that. What we've done for the co-working rating is really take that initial V2 standard, which has a number of features within that aren't really applicable to co-working operation. For example, things like control of the fabric of the building, things like insulation in the walls. A lot of these co-working operators are coming into spaces that have already been occupied by a co-working space before, and so don't have that data to hand. So we've taken 55 features of the main V2 standard, and operators have to achieve 23. So a nice scoring, but I do think it's still quite difficult with the features that included. Things that we've included are around nutrition and fitness, so the provision of nutritional education, the nutrition that operators provide, so the kind of snacks and things that we see in a convene, what are they offering, and those things have to be 50% or more fruits or vegetables. Fitness, things around fitness studios, having the right equipment within there and having a designated space for members to work out. Air quality, things like air quality monitoring sensors and that being displayed within the workspace so that we'd see that. And then one of my kind of favourite ones, or the contentious ones, considering this is a global product, a new mother room. So we all know in co-working, every square foot is lettable, and trying to talk to operators about a new mother room was a conversation that we had multiple times. But I do think in certain areas of the world where parents go back to work earlier than maybe the UK where we're from, that designated area that's low in lighting, has a comfortable chair, has a fridge, has a sink, has a nice table or desk, is really important for the well-being and kind of continuation of parents as they go back to work. So we've picked that out. And then accessibility to water and water quality, something that we're really passionate about, and that accessibility to clean drinking water. So just a snippet of a few features. They're one of my favourite ones.
That's awesome. It's fascinating to better understand that it's not just about the building, right? It's also the amenities or the offerings, because it's really easy just to put out just the candy bowls always in every co-working space, right? It's everyone knows it. So something maybe a little bit healthier there. That's really a great insight. Thank you. I'm curious, you did touch on some operators that are taking over space from others or whatnot. If you were a co-working operator, what's something, maybe they were opening up their first space or opening up a new space, what are some things that maybe you could encourage them to consider now in the planning process rather than the retrofitting process, right? Sometimes it can be a little bit more costly on the front end, but initial investment, but actually less costly over the long run, because then you're not ripping things out or whatnot. What are some of the physical aspects that you kept in that rating that they might need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think for me it would be, we call a restorative space. So this is an area within the project boundaries, the working operation space, that is so enlightening, kind of mindfulness room where you've had a difficult meeting or you've got personal issues going on at home and you need to make a phone call, somewhere that a member can go to really just de-stress and debrief, because people are working in co-working spaces, we spend 2, 3, 4 days a week at work. And having that space to just take a minute and relax away from your desk or your colleagues, it might not be something that you want to share with them, is really important. And then the second thing I would say is access to it's difficult in big cities, but just being able to have plants around and that kind of connection to nature in the workplace. These people might be commuting in from a more countryside location, and so coming into a workspace that has fresh air, that you can go outside to, or some kind of nice greenery in the workspace is always welcome.
And I think just to add to that, is, as you just highlighted as well, from the initial sort of insights Olivia was giving, a lot of these are operational, and some of these is physical. If you take air quality meters as an example, and out of the 55 features, as we say, you need 23, but it's totally flexible. So you can choose the one that suit you. So it's not as though it's mandatory, thou must achieve X, Y, and Z. It's totally flexible. The features are very, obviously really well designed. This is an IWBI product that we have just developed in partnership with them. But what I would say to anyone really thinking about this is to really understand the features that are. It's a menu of things, and then design that to what you want to achieve as an operator, because this is something, and I'm not going to go into sustainability, that I always find sustainability people care about. Of course they do, but they often miss the opportunity to actually align it to what you want to achieve from that space and the message you want to give. So I think this is, for me, what the Well co-working rating really allows you to do, is to really plan on how that aligns to your brand and your vision as a whole, and pick the things that really matter for you. And so I think that's on a sort of a higher strategic level how I would envisage using this to your example.
Great insight. I've worn a few different hats over my decade in Flex, and having supported occupiers for a while, I did notice what you mentioned earlier, Sam, was more questioning or requirements of understanding what the carbon footprint would be, or do certain spaces have certain types of lighting, and it was always challenging to navigate because every company would have their own like survey, and then you're trying to communicate that out to all the other operators. You're trying to teach and coach them, encourage them, also being like, why don't you know some of this, or some of this you might not know. So I'm curious, now that it's live, like what does the process look like for an operator? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest out there. Like, what is just the relative like hard cost, and what can they expect? I know you said it's very much self-service, but what is a general timeline, just so that people can understand what the investment of time and potentially money is?
Yeah, sure. So one of the kind of main points when we were developing this was that it is low cost and it is easier than the main application to submit, because we know a lot of these operational policies are in place already with operators as they go through their pre-planned maintenance throughout the year. So in terms of cost, an operator will never pay more than $1,200 per site per year. So yes, it's on a volume basis if you have 10 sites, and that's more, but we've really capped it there. And then also thinking about the process, an operator will get in touch with one of our team. We'll talk them through the feature set and the verification methods. And then an operator has to submit 23 out of the 55 features with the associated verification method. So they could be a letter of assurance from a designer, an engineer, or an owner. It could be a professional narrative about how they've connected the place that they're in to the workspace that they're operating. It could be a technical drawing, like a floor plan that shows where the water speakers are, or it could be, I'm trying to think of the last one. Yeah, there's plenty to go out. They submit that through our team, and then there's about a 10-day review period. So we have a fantastic review team in-house, and they review that over a 10-day period, and then the operator gets back an achievement if achieved. If not, if they've missed the mark on a couple of features, we can go back for round 2 and give them guidance. And then achieve, then main benefit away from achieving the rating itself is that Instant operates a constellation of online marketplaces, the largest reaching in the world. And what we can do is we can highlight that rating our sites, so that when an occupier is searching for space, they can search by health. So yeah, all in all, about 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think, and on the self-serve, so as you say, it should be 2 weeks. And the self-serve element, what I really mean is the features are freely available to everyone. And so then understanding what they are, understanding the 23 or more, many people would do more than that without a doubt. And then just aligning the evidence requirements against those feature sets, that then goes back to what I was saying. So that's the element of self-serve. And then the validation is done by us at Instant Group, regardless of the site, anywhere in the world. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much.
That's really fascinating. Well, what I've got a question about is, I know that it's a manual process. It's self-serve. I can know what I have to submit, but then I have to actually get stuff and submit it to you. Is that something I have to do every year as an operator? Is there any plans to automate some of that and keep the rating? Or is it something that's going to be a manual process every year to hold the certification?
With a kind of high standard of the Well rate, there is a manual review process to be done. As the review team, we have duty of care and auditing to do around, we can't just say there's a well rating issue when it has been. And so on an annual basis, operators will resubmit their evidence. That'll be on an auditing basis, so that we'll be able to take samples every year as opposed to the full 23 or more features, which obviously makes that renewal process a lot smoother for the operators go through.
And I think, Hector, to your point, over time, the whole plan is innovation around how you can automate some of this. And I think the investments that Instagroup are making across our marketplaces, I think that will come over time. It feels quite manual, but actually over time, we'll be able to automate more and more. And I think that renewal side, without a doubt, is the place that automation will really happen. I think up front, we've really got to be robust. This is an IWBI product. It's absolutely fundamental that there are no corners. It complies absolutely with their products. But I can see as those renewals, things might not have changed and so on and so forth. That is where the automation and the sort of reduction in time will come, to Olivia's point.
That makes a lot of sense. I just have one last clarifying question for myself. Is it a pass-fail certification, or is there tiers? If you have all 52 of the 52, you're like platinum, gold, superb rating, or is it just pass-fail?
Sure, it's just pass-fail. So we have been speaking to the IWBI about including points, one to make it more competitive, also for occupiers to see how far into the rating that the operators have got, so that they very well may come next year, but for now, just pass-fail.
Yeah, and I think we discussed that at length, and because, and we're very much led by the IWBI and their wider rating systems. In the end, we are trying to provide healthy buildings to many people, not just big landlords or big corporates. This is to many people and give the surety. And so by hitting 23 of these 55 features, the IWBI and all the evidence they have is that is a healthy building. Now, I would suggest that many people, going back to my previous point, will do far more than that. And that is an opportunity for them, going back to what I said around how you align what healthy buildings mean to you as an operator. You will easily be able to use those features because they're backed up by research and scientific evidence around productivity and healthy activities that will allow you to go far beyond just having that seal as well. So I think there's a kind of quid pro quo. What I didn't want to do is drive, and this was very much led by the IWBIs, to that platinum side, because it drives the wrong behaviors. And actually, we're just keen that people really start to engage and have the opportunities to do better over time.
Great. When do you think the first ratings are going to be released?
We're starting to review as of Monday, 10 days from Monday.
Fantastic. We look forward to sharing what those ratings are and who's passed in one of the subsequent newsletters. Thanks very much again for joining us, and we'll have you back on the pod soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again for listening in this week. As always, if you have any feedback or you'd like to have your news or your views shared in the newsletter or on the podcast, go to thisweekincoworking.com, get in touch with us there, or email our podcast team at podcast@thisweekincoworking.com. See you all next week.